that's written through education, through traumatic experiences.
Like your programming.
Yes. And so what happens is when Black people have traumatic experience, which is what we have through television, through all sorts of media over and over and over again, it rewrites our code and we start operating in contrary to what we are supposed to operate in.
So so would you say that's epigenetics, or would you say that's like a mental reprogramming, or is that like one and the same?
It's kind of one and the same. Okay. Also, because see, epigenetics, okay, when it gets to epigenetics, it is the mental reprogramming. But what people don't know is there is a test that you can actually take, and it goes into your DNA. This test can tell if you killed somebody. This test can tell if you got into a car accident. It's written in your DNA code. So yes, it is that. It is an outward event that is happening, but it is coded onto your DNA as you live. And these events are passed down to generations. So think about slavery.
Yeah.
Those events, those traumas are passed down to our DNA. The theme in the Bible is really, you can only be convicted according to your conscience, which then we're going back into the spiritual. Because if you don't understand or feel like you're guilty, then what can you be punished for? When a Black person gets arrested, what's the first thing they do? They slide you a piece of paper. They want you to write a statement. First thing they got to do is get you to admit guilt. Once they get you to admit guilt, then they can convict you based on your own conscience. If you never admit or never feel that you're guilty, unless they have you on camera and just like see you doing something
like something hard cold, like hard cold facts.
But unless they have that on you and you never admit guilt or you never confess, or what can they do? You're in your mind, you've done nothing wrong, so they cannot convict you according to your own conscience.
Wow.
Because in your innate spirit, or your deep down inside of you, you don't feel like you're guilty. There is a movie Denzel Washington tried to tell us, Roman Israel. Please watch that movie. He was basically, that was the theme of that whole movie. He was basically, because there was an infraction that was done, but it was like, it was for the greater good, but it was still wrong. But because it was for the greater good, he didn't feel guilty for it. And if you don't feel guilty, you really feel like you did the right thing, you're not guilty. There's no two laws. It's just how you navigate. And yes, of course, it does matter who you know. There's a case that I did a podcast interview on. There was a little girl who was ran over in her driveway by a lady who had some political connections. And what she did was, the bus was completely stopped. The thing was out, lights were on. So because she was trying to get somewhere, instead of her going around that way, she went that way and killed a little girl right in her driveway.
Wow.
This woman has never served an ounce of time. Nothing has ever happened. She's very well connected there, but she also doesn't feel like she's guilty. She also does not.
But she just ran over her whole child.
Exactly.
Like, how do you not feel guilty?
She even drugged the child for a couple of miles or a couple of feet before she even stopped. The baby was so mangled up, I don't even believe they were able to have an open casket for the baby. Look on my page. Amaya Braxton is her name. The story is viral. It's gone TikTok viral and everything, but it is crazy. This woman has never served a day of time. Like, they detained her. They never arrested her. The sheriff on the scene thought it was going to be an open and closed case, but she knew somebody in the system. And so we are actually fighting for justice for that. And we put it out on the platform. So make sure you check out that podcast.
There's more people that have the perspective that it's a horrible world than it is good.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's when you really think about it, it's honestly like an equal part. Where there is evil, there is good. Like, they coincide. You can't have good deeds without there being injustice being done in order for those good deeds to be done. You know what I'm saying? Like, they rely on each other. And that same breath, I say, like, I've came across something that said that like, humans need a form of chaos. Like,
yes,
even in relationships. Like, for example, I was reading something, I forgot what it was, but it was basically like a lot of no, it was I think it was like a TED Talk or something.
Yeah,
it was like a TED Talk or something, and they were talking about like why good relationships fail, and he was just like, certain people, they need amount of chaos, and then usually that amount of chaos stems from their childhood. So like, say if they grew up in like a really disruptive home and they like always argued, and then you get into a relationship where y'all communicate well, y'all are always on like a good terms with each other, like that part of you is just like, I gotta fight you for something.
Right.
It's like, it's not working because you're used to that amount of chaos in your life,
right?
You know,
that's very understandable.
So like you really can't have just a peaceful world, because chaos will grow
manifest,
from that.
Absolutely.
Manifest. People like lose their mind, like nothing's going on,
think
like
about
everything's
it.
going well.
So you just implemented the fact that there's a something that came down from the generations, from parent to child, and now this child ends up acting this out in their relationship.
Yes.
So it's carried down. Those traumas, those events, those activities are carried over into the different relationships. Here's what I believe about the bad and good. I heard this very recently. Life is really kind of like the not so great stuff, because you'll probably experience more of that. The key to navigating that is always finding the silver lining, or always finding the lesson, because in every tragedy or in every bad thing that happens, there's always something good that can come out of it. And sometimes, again, you have to have that chaos, so you have to have those bad things in order to really be able to appreciate the good times. Because if it's always balanced, then to me it just becomes, if it can be that controlled, then that's also a matrix.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's just like too perfect, and then you're looking at a Garden of Eden situation, and it will never get back to that status quo. But it's like, and the bad things are pretty much what we'll experience more. But if we can train our minds to not see it as bad always, then it reshapes everything. So again,
your perspective,
like right, so
forms your world.
So it makes it not bad, even though it probably very well could be, quote unquote, a bad experience. But if we find the lesson, like, oh, I see why I had to go through that, because now, I'm here, you know. So, yeah.
I guess it's, like you said, it's being able to see that silver lining.